Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. I'm your host, Marty Bennett, and this week on the Roundup, we're going to be covering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days, and we'll be answering those in a way to provide you some insight that might assist you in what you do on your jobs on campus in international education. So, as always, we come to you live from the home office. Not always, but we are coming to you live from the home office this week to cover these 3 topics like we do each week. We look at news stories that pop up in our feeds over the week and cover the topics that we do in a method that answers kind of themes we see developing from these topics that we talk about in the news each week. And for those unfamiliar with SMIE Consulting, I started this company 9 years ago now, after I left Education USA, to help better serve the higher ed community and international education service providers. And as a result of that, one of the things I started about 5 years ago now, is what we call the newsletter called All the SMIE News Fit to Share. And that newsletter was an attempt to provide our hot takes on some of the top issues of the day that appeared in news feeds over the previous week, on social media stories, on international education stories, and often where those two overlap. And what we do each week here on the Roundup is we look at those news stories that we had on Monday when we have a newsletter version that comes out, either an email version or a LinkedIn version. I'll be dropping the links to those in the chat, as well as ways that you can sign up for them. And we have this week's most recent newsletter had some interesting social media stories, also a combination of some U.S. and international centered international ed stories, so that provides some context. And that's one of the things we always talk about with SMIE Consulting and on the Roundups quite often is what we call having a global perspective on what is happening in the wider world of international education in other countries and how we can be learning from other countries' successes and failures in a lot of ways, and things to avoid in what we do in our jobs day to day working with international educators and students on campus. So our first topic of the day is coming to you on the backs of last week's topic, where we talked about how do you connect with international students online. It was talking about the importance of living where your audience lives, having a presence where your prospective students and their parents spend their time, and it's going to be online, it's going to be on mobile devices primarily, and so how do you reach them? So that was kind of the theme of one of the last week's questions. This week, the topic of specifically how do you reach Indian and Chinese students online is evidenced by an upcoming webinar that tackles this topic in particular from our friends at Sonorbis. That asks how, and we'll cover in depth the differences between the two social media milieus in India and China. They are dramatically different. India doesn't play well with any of China's social media, and things like TikTok and many Chinese apps aren't even allowed to operate in India. And in China, they have their own social media environment and have had for many years now, dominated by a very different set of social media platforms than are available in most of the rest of the world. And ours typically aren't available in China, so they use their own primarily. So we know that's kind of the nature of the beast, and India has this Sonorbis webinar that's coming up tackles India as one of the most important platforms to have a presence on is WhatsApp. And WhatsApp, as those of you know, is a messaging application, so very much one-to-one or one-to-small groups that you can have those kind of ongoing conversations. So not all the bells and whistles of a Facebook, a YouTube, a TikTok, those type of things. But WhatsApp has recently introduced, and we talked about that last week in the Roundup and in our newsletter, that they do now have the ability to send up to 60 seconds of recorded video messages via WhatsApp. So a way to extend the reach of how you can get in front of students. I'll be going to India this Friday for a 10-day trip where we'll be doing a number of fairs with our agent partners that I'm planning to have QR codes where students can sign up. They'll drop in their phone numbers as part of that RFI that they're going to be filling out online, and I'll be able to capture those RFIs, those phone numbers, and drop them into a WhatsApp group that I'll create for students that have attended that fair. And it will allow me to have more direct communications with those students that have attended that event. I can talk to them, say, hey, thanks for coming to the IDP event in Delhi. Really great to have met you. I hope you found the information you found about our institution useful, and talking about who we are at UNLV and all the things that they can benefit from if they decide to apply. So I'll do that. As a result of this new feature through WhatsApp, I can record a short video and I can send it to all of them. And give them a sense of I'm recognizing them as important. I see that I'm making that personal connection, and then using that as a kickoff point to continue a conversation more broadly with them about different deadlines coming up, different things I want to make them aware of about the application process, different deadlines, all those kind of things. That can be part of what I'm engaging with them more on in the coming weeks, rather than just dumping them into a ComFlow and having them just get the standard messages that everyone gets. So want to personalize as much as you can in these early days in that recruitment process, which I think can make a very significant difference. WhatsApp's going to allow me to do that. The other side of the coin with Chinese students, for example, WeChat we know is the kind of the be-all and end-all of applications. It's kind of the everything that Facebook, PayPal, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Instagram does. You can you pay for things using WeChat in China through WeChat Pay. Everything's done through this app. It's like a monster, behemoth app. Everybody has it. And that's something that if you're trying to reach the lion's share of the Chinese population online, and particularly students, they're going to be on this. And their parents are also going to be on this. So having a verified WeChat account, not just for you personally, because you're not verified in China. You have to be you can be on WeChat as a Westerner, but you won't be verified in China. But if you use certain services like a Synorbis, you could get a verified WeChat account, and that allows you to have the kind of visibility in search results when students are looking for ways to connect with institutions. They will see you more. You'll show up higher in the search results than just if you were relying on a standard WeChat account that says UNLV in it. You can have one that's verified, and that's an important piece of reaching that audience. So this webinar coming up, we'll talk about that. And Teresa, thanks for jumping on the chat. Hope you're well. Do I bring students to Ghana? Not yet. My job is primarily on the inbound, bringing students to UNLV. And helping institutions do that through my consulting business in the past, but my main focus now is with UNLV and helping them grow their international student presence from around the world, and helping to develop partnerships. That's the other part of my job, helping to develop partnerships with institutions around the world that can help bring them in. So, but happy to have a conversation offline about that. But in terms of this topic on how do you reach Indian and Chinese students online, you have to know where they spend their time, and that's kind of one of those principles we talk about all the time with the 6 Ps of knowing your audience, knowing where they spend their time, what platforms they're on. That's one of the 6 Ps, and that is obviously takes some research, takes understanding the data that's out there, talking to industry experts, finding the best tips and techniques for how to leverage those platforms to reach student audiences in those key markets. So that's for me. This is going to be a webinar I'll be attending. I'll be in India at the time, so it'll be interesting to see what time of day I'll be catching that webinar. But looking for ways to better connect with students that I'll be meeting beyond just that initial invite. I'm limiting the amount of paper that I'm carrying. It's going to be more through QR codes, RFIs that they're going to be able to get to. There's a one-sheeter that they'll get. We also have a card that we give them that features some of our new video content that we have had developed through the college tour, which we work on. I had a number of students interviewed last year when the college tour came on campus, did the interviews, did their professional video clips, and then we had them all broken down into 20 or 2 to 3 minute clips for each student. So a number of them, about 6 or 7 of the students, are international. So we have some of that content that we want to share widely with students that are interested in us, and as a way to help have our students tell the story, have their peers tell our prospective students how good we are and could be for them. So those are ways that I'll be using WhatsApp and my presence in India with WhatsApp and these other tools to send the links to these students that they'll be able to use to get a better understanding of what student life will be like in terms of what life at UNLV is like. So that's my example of what I'll be doing. We're in the process of looking at ways that we can go down the road of getting a verified WeChat account, looking at getting a website that's locally hosted in China that will again help us with search results with our content specific for the Chinese market. We're developing student ambassadors one of which will be Chinese speaking, that can do regular content on WeChat for us as we look to expand our reach into that market. So there's a whole lot of different levers we're going to try and pull to better our interactions with our prospective audiences before at the beginning of that enrollment process, recruitment process, but also throughout their application and admissions and eventual arrival on campus. So these are added tools that should be part of every institution's arsenal as they go about searching to bring students from abroad to their campuses. So we'll talk more about that, as we always do at different points throughout the year. In terms of our second question of the day, are you tracking your international alumni? And how important is this? I would say, and I had a post that went out this morning about this, I've already had a number of people commenting about, is the lost opportunity that in international education, probably the single biggest one we have in terms of showing the proof of our efforts, really. We all seek and want our international students that come in, any student that comes to our campuses, whoever they are, first-gen, international, adult returning students, whatever it might be, online students, we all want them to become, right, successful in what they do, successful alumni of our institution. But for our international students, these are probably, for international educators, these are the ones that are probably the most easily forgotten when it comes to connecting them again throughout the process of the recruitment of what we do in international education. Karen Fisher, you all know from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, she has her weekly newsletter, comes out on Wednesdays, that last week focused on international alumni and how they are an growing area of focus for institutions around the country. But for the greater majority that I've worked at over the years, I think I've been on 6 campuses in the United States in international student services and student recruitment. And on only one of those did we have an international alumni person that was specifically responsible for managing our overseas alumni, connecting them with events and doing things for them, keeping in contact with them. This was back in mid-noughties, before there was really the social LinkedIn wasn't really a big thing like it is today in terms of a way to track international graduates. But the article that Karen shared last week, or her piece on it, shared examples of how there are alumni offices around the country that don't track international alumni because their systems, their CRMs that they have to manage their contacts, don't have fields that allow for international addresses. Something as simple as that prevents some alumni offices on colleges around the U.S. from even thinking about keeping or going after international alumni. And how silly is that? I mean, to not just because your CRM doesn't have the fields to capture international alums, get a new CRM. When you see the value of what international alumni can bring to a campus, there are some cultural things involved here, because most universities outside the United States, that there's not a real history of what we call alumni development, advancements, which is fundraising basically, for lack of a better word, that a connection with an institution isn't as strong and isn't as organized from a university perspective. Students obviously have pride in their institutions, hopefully, and are, but they're not giving back philanthropically in large scales internationally, because that's not to their institutions within their own countries. So that's really not a thing. But there is such potential there. And it doesn't all have to be for advancement. And obviously the alumni and advancement people will say, yeah, it does. That's why we exist. Well, we exist to help your alumni stay connected with their institutions. And one of the many ways that you can do that, you obviously send them news about what's going on campus, and provide them different opportunities to re-engage with events that are happening on campus if they come for reunions and that type of thing. But one of the ways you can keep international alumni engaged is if you have a way for them to show off a little bit and show their success, and share why they came and why they have become successful in their chosen pursuits. And this is something that I think we really miss opportunities to keep that circle going. All right, because it is a full life cycle. We bring students in as from initial prospects to applied and admitted students, to eventually matriculating on our campuses, arriving, going through orientation, going through the first year of getting settled, getting an apartment, getting settled in the residence halls, whatever it might be, getting a job on campus, developing their skills to prepare them for their career in their academics, and also through career services offices, and eventually to prepare for becoming an alumni and getting that first job out of college, whatever, or going on to further graduate education, whatever it might be. It is a student life cycle, but oftentimes the alumni, and especially today when the issues of what are some of the most convincing pieces to why a student chooses a particular institution. It's they're convinced that the ROI of the money they're going to spend on their degree is worth it because of the outcomes that they see from that institution, from graduates of that institution, famous alumni, whatever it is. That international alumni piece can be a part of that, particularly for international students. There may be thousands of U.S. citizens or permanent residents that have come to your campus and gone on to good things, and maybe you know who they are. Hopefully you have a few of those anecdotal stories you can roll into that. But do you have any of those for international graduates that are successful, or have U.S. grads who have gone overseas and become successful in their chosen pursuits? Are you capturing those moments and using those anecdotal stories to share with your future students? Because parents and students want to know from their peers, people who are students now or recent grads, what their degree can lead to if they're from your campus. So do you have any of those anecdotal stories? Better yet, do you have any data of international graduates and success rates in jobs and where they've gotten placements over the last year or two? You'll have that globally for your students, all graduates. You might have a list of top employers, that type of thing. Everybody has those. But do you have one that's specific to international students? And when you can drill down to that level, because we all know there are more hoops that international students need to jump through to even get a job after they graduate than what you might face if you're a U.S. citizen. So you have to have, ideally, to document your ROI in data and for international students, not just your global or all your graduates. And you have to have, ideally, some anecdotal stories, either video testimonials, websites where their profiles are put, where you can potentially reach out to them. Those are the kind of things that will really enhance what you do on the front end, your recruitment. You make your institutions more realistic and more attractive to an international student that has some doubts and maybe doesn't know why they should choose your school over your competitor. But if you can show those fruits of going to your campus, becoming a successful alumni, having a career in their chosen field that is a direct path from your institution, great. Those are absolutely the kinds of people you should be building into your promotional materials, into your comm flow, into the outcomes piece that you should be promoting, the success that your graduates have in getting that first job and becoming successful in whatever their chosen pursuits are. These are the kinds of things that are really vital to talking through, making international alumni an important part of your how you recruit for your institution, because they're your best. We talk about are your students being your international students. If you're recruiting internationally, they're your best advocates because they're living the experience of the prospective students. But a close second to that are, and in parents' eyes probably, are going to be the ones that are more important because they've gone through it. They've gotten that first job. They've built a successful career, whatever it might be. Those are the kind of end results that really will speak to not only that peer thing that matters most to prospective students, but that outcomes piece, that the professional piece that parents want to know about. So how are you building that in? Most schools aren't doing a good job of that. But I must give a special shout out to Carla McCollum. She is one of, when I joined Education USA back in 2008, she was one of the first people that I met and she was at a community college in Missouri. She was very new to international education, didn't really know much of anything, and she'll admit that freely. But she's now she's been international at community colleges in both Missouri and in Iowa. She's been chair of Study Missouri and chair of Study Iowa, and now she's working in the alumni office as an international rep for Iowa State University. So she's moved on into a realm that is, I think she's perfect for. She has this great personality, and she's really fantastic at her job. And she's come in the last 15 years from knowing nothing to being now a leader in international alumni development. And that is something I'm so happy for her, and so I'm going to be picking her brain about some of her experiences within Iowa State. But those are the kinds of and institutions that make that commitment that, hey, we could be doing much more with our international alumni. And this in engaging them in what you do and tracking them first, and then eventually engaging them in what you do on the front end of your student recruitment, and because they can feed each other. Again, they'll want to give back to their and help future students like themselves, because they'll remember that they were probably walking into their institution when they were making their decision. They didn't know what was going to happen necessarily, or knew anybody that might have been directed to them as, hey, you can be that person in 5 years, or you can have a career like this person does from our country. And those are the things that really add that layer of value and connection for international students, to know that hey, there's someone like me who came to this school and has now gone on to do great things. And when you connect those dots, the possibilities just expand almost exponentially in terms of what you can really do when you are connecting that whole life cycle of students together, from alumni to prospective students back, not just graduating those successful alumni, but involving them in the recruitment of your future students. There's so many layers of possibilities that you can build on once you begin tracking them, and that's the key for this second question here. Now, this third question is one of the harder ones that we talk about here on the Roundup, and that has to do with students who come and then disappear. And I'm not saying they've disappeared off the planet, they've died or been kidnapped or any of those kind of things. I'm not painting that kind of worst case scenario. This comes to me today as a result of a story on Sky News in the UK about an Indian student who'd come to begin a master's degree in, I think it was computer science, and he only studied for a month, and then he disappeared off the campus, didn't attend class. He basically went underground. And the article and the video that is shot with him talks about, and the title of the article is, "I had no idea how life would be inside the lives of those who overstay their visas and go underground." And this is particularly painting the picture in the UK with net migration levels at UK record levels, that the government really has admitted they don't have public data on this group of students that overstay visas or start the programs, then disappear. They are then fail to return to their home countries. It's really a very sad state of affairs, but this particular student, he had done his bachelor's in India, came to the UK for a master's degree, and that he is now relying on cash in hand jobs to survive. And that in the US, there's the stereotype of if you want some workers to work on a project, you go to Home Depot and you can hire folks there that don't have the right to work necessarily, that are probably undocumented, that just are living day to day for when doing these pickup jobs so they can feed their families and pay for rent or whatever it might be. That's the kind of equivalent here in the UK. They're what they call cash in hand jobs. That he's not working for a paycheck. He's does jobs for pocket money and cleaning work, construction work, whatever it might be. So this student, he says his politics got him in trouble back home in India, and that he paid an agency £7,000 to arrange a university place for him in England. And the student had come and had a valid visa back in 2021 when he came, started the month of the master's in business management, not computers, somewhere in the north of England, that he found it too hard. The college where he had the place said that couldn't comment on him because they don't comment on individual cases for privacy reasons. So he talks through his that his systems had he couldn't survive. He just wanted to get out of India, really, and that's why he left. Now, just before I came on live for this chat, having a conversation with the two colleagues. We're in the middle of submitting a session proposal for NAFSA next year in New Orleans, right? Yeah. So we're getting our session proposal done, and we're just sharing stories about what's happening on campus. And in particular, both the other folks I was submitting this session proposal, we're talking about transfer outs and how that's kind of not quite, but it's the equivalent of the students that come in and then disappear. They transfer out they come in legally through SEVIS on your visa into the United States. They're in the SEVIS as your student, and then they come in and request, sometimes without even coming to campus, they get in the country and say, I want to transfer out before they enroll to a different institution. And oftentimes, there are some legit ones out there, but oftentimes it's, I want to transfer out to a school that is lesser quality, to a school that they came in for a master's program, and then they want to transfer out to an English language program that they don't need because they've already met the English requirements for your institution when they were admitted to your master's program. So there's a lot of that out there, and in terms of transfer outs. Back in the day, this was also seen as those institutions that had a lot of transfer outs. I started at an institution a few years ago that had a significant transfer out problem before I arrived, and where they were literally admitting 500 students, 300 show up, and then 150 of them transfer out before the classes even begin. They come into the country on our visa, but they would transfer out. And that raised flags with SEVP, and they were called in, and then we've got a transfer out problem, we need to deal with this, and we took steps to do that. Some institutions institute payments to transfer a student out as a way to recover some costs, because it's obviously a lot of lost work for admitting that student, getting them their paperwork for a visa, bringing them into campus, and then they all of a sudden want to transfer to a lesser school or a school that they clearly have no intention of going to, because anyway, that their intent to really is to disappear. There were the case a couple of years ago for literally all the colleges in Washington State were called in by SEVP to a virtual meeting to talk about this problem of students transferring out. And it was in particular at the time, it was for students from Bangladesh who were coming on into Washington State on to the different colleges on valid visas, but then would transfer out or not show up and be no-shows, but had entered the country. They would disappear into the woodwork. Many of these, they are kind of termed economic migrants because in terms of what their end goal is, they come in as students, just as any way like this British student or student who went to the UK from India, come into a country just to get away from whatever was happening back home. It might have been politics that drove this one student. Many students that are trying to just get away out from home are trying to find access to a country where they know they can do more than they could ever do in their home country. Some of them obviously do want to come for education legitimately and do end up getting degrees and do wonderful things. But what we're talking about here with these students that are coming in and then disappear, the reality is they go underground like this student in the UK did. They're more than likely coming into communities where there's already an existing network of people from their country who live there and have maybe done a similar thing or have migrated legally to the United States to do that. And them coming in and then disappearing, not enrolling in universities, not enrolling in colleges, that can have long-term significant consequences for your institution with Homeland Security. There's a whole lot of issues that can get you in trouble with Homeland Security, and this is certainly one of those. And institutions have gotten in trouble. The individual students, unless they do something wrong or get on the radar of government officials, they can literally disappear into the woodwork. We're a pretty big country. And if they keep a low profile, working like the student in the UK did, cash-in-hand jobs, that's a real challenge for us. But we look at particularly this transfer out issue that we face in the United States. We saw stories earlier this year of Australian universities complaining that students were transferring out after a semester. We would love for international students not be allowed to leave on a transfer out until after they'd been enrolled and paid their fees for a semester. So we can at least get some of that back, but that's not. There are folks in our business who will say, oh, they can go wherever they want. That's their legal right to do so. And it's a loophole that exists in the law that does allow them to transfer out. And as long as that rule's what it is, we can put in fees on our own. Some call that immoral to do that. Some would say absolutely we should do that. So there's a debate out there, but what can you do about it? Certainly that is something that takes, and you see trends over as things develop over a period of time. You'll see trends if they're coming from particular countries, if they're coming from particular agents in particular countries that you do business in, then that's give you evidence that you need to then cut off that pipeline, because there's nothing worse than going through a full enrollment cycle for an enrollment manager. There's nothing worse than working with a student all the way through an enrollment cycle and having groups of students from particular agencies coming and then disappearing after they get there. The agencies don't get paid, probably because the students have paid them enough on the front end where they're breaking even or getting ahead. But those are the things that we need to stay on top of these things and have an idea of and understand if this is happening in certain places more than others. Then we need to look at the whys and the wheres of where they're coming from, and get to a policy point in your office where you can say, okay, we need to change tack in this country or with this agency, or cut them off and look at other ways if we're going to be able to recruit successfully in certain countries. Some institutions will completely blacklist, not officially, but they'll say, okay, we're not going to work with anybody in this country, and agents, any students that come to us from this country, we're going to require to go through Education USA, for example, and to kind of weed them out if they're to get to the real serious students, because that's who you want on your campus. You don't want the students to come who are going to disappear. You don't want to facilitate that, right? So that's, I think, what we all struggle with day to day when we do, particularly this time of year when it's new student arrival and orientation weeks and around the U.S. It becomes a hot topic every year about this time. So for those on campus, wish you well in dealing with this. It's certainly a challenge and one that we want to minimize as much as possible. So wish you all the best in your pursuits, and thanks for those of you who are able to watch live, and we'll certainly get in touch and keep the conversation going on topics that we talk about each week. So until next week, where I'll be in India, so I'll be connecting with you on a live probably from IC3. Yes, I'll be attending the IC3 conference in Hyderabad next week. So do look out for our Midweek Roundup coming live from Hyderabad next Wednesday. Until then, I wish you all the best. Have a great day.